Ah, I have access.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our April um, presentation for the Denver Area Access User Group. And thank you for joining us to watch this video. Let us know what you think through comments or by liking the video. And today we are really excited to have with us Adam Waller, who has written a version control add-in for Microsoft Access. Now, what is version control? Well, in the developer world as a whole, of course, version control has been around a long time. It's a way of tracking your changes, rolling back bugs that you may have introduced, and basically managing your source code. Something that has been really hard in Access because Access is just stored as a giant binary file. But today, Adam is going to join us and talk to us about his add-in for Microsoft Access, which support goes back as far as 2010, which I believe Adam will be using for the demo. So we're old school here at the Denver Area User Group. But thank you so much for joining us. And Adam, welcome. And thanks for presenting to the Denver Area Access User Group. Welcome.
Well, thank you, George. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to share. And I know using version control in Microsoft Access database development has been a game changer for me in my development career, I guess you could say. Just kind of a brief history of how I kind of got started in that front. I started in as a assistant to a network administrator just right out of high school, about 18 years old. And the guy that I worked with, he introduced me to Microsoft Access, and he did some amazing things, and just really neat to see what he did. And I've for the past 25 years have been really enjoying building different applications and such in Microsoft Access, and just found it to be a very powerful tool for rapid application development. All the way from simple things, integrations, to some more complex things. Just as an example, this is an order entry program that I created for the organization that I work for, that all developed right in Microsoft Access. Pulling from a SQL backend, lets me select a person and add a product to the cart, and then it real time goes out and looks up shipping with an API. And when I'm set to go, I can just go and make sure I've confirmed a shipping method. Let's go with ground. And then I can go and confirm and pay for it, and just have little wizard-like screens that you can walk through. And just was a huge help to our users to have something very simple to go through, and very user-friendly and intuitive. But on the back end, you think, well, that's kind of a big project to manage here. Well, if you got all these different library databases and modules, and how do you keep track of all that? And that's where the version control just really made a big difference for us in being able to take a big project like that and have it exported, broken out into source files that you can manage in a very practical way. And so that's to me one of the biggest things that I found is you've got this powerful tool with rapid application development in Microsoft Access, but how to be able to manage that in a larger scale environment when you get to multiple projects that you're working on, and jumping back to something several years later, trying to remember where things are at, and adding updates, bug fixes, deploying those to users and such. So just it was a huge boost for us to have some of that, be able to go back to snapshots to rebuild at any point in time, comprehensive comparisons to see what has changed. And that really, it allowed us to make that jump from having a database just be this, the single binary file that has everything all contained inside, but you're not exactly sure, it's all just this black box. but being able to export that into source files, text-based files that you can then manage in a version control system, such as Git is what I use for most of our projects. And it just streamlines the development in a tremendous way. But I wanted to just give a little bit of a demo today of, so what exactly does that look like? How can you, how would you get started? What does it look like in a practical sense there? So I'm going to just take Microsoft Access, and I'm going to go to a template and just grab a basic vanilla template just right out of the box. And we'll tell it to enable some content. And actually, before I do that, I'm going to make sure that I put it in a folder that will be helpful for us. Okay, so we're just going to call this one students. All right, so we'll create. All right, let's try that one more time here. We're going to create a new sample template. Go to the students database. Okay, and we'll do that. Students demo. Okay, there we go. All right, so we'll enable content. Okay, so now I've got just a basic, Microsoft Access database just built right from a template that they have here, and just to kind of show you how would this work from a version control standpoint. So if I click on new, I'm just going to add some data here. Just give a name. We'll come over here. We'll stick a picture in there. Let's grab a picture. Okay, so now I've got a little piece of data that's in this database. So I can come in, I can click, and I can see that my data. It's like, okay, that's great. What about the version control side? So Microsoft Access, as we've mentioned already, doesn't have anything that's built in to be able to manage things on a source level. So what some developers have done is created add-ins or tools to export the different components, the forms and tables and reports and all the different pieces into text files, into files that can be stored in version control. And what this add-in does, version control, you can see this tab up here, and add-in here, is it allows us to basically be able to work with this project using some very handy little buttons you can click on to export your source files and work with all of that. So if I want to actually use this database with version control, that can export some source files, but I actually want to put this in a repository. And you can use different systems for that. I like using Git. GitHub gives you private repositories that you can have. GitLab is another great one. You can even have a local GitLab instance inside your network and have everything just right, self-contained, nothing online there. So it's another great option there. And then it's helpful to have a little client that you can use. Some people like using the command line and running everything in Git through that, and that's all great, works well for them. I find that GitHub Desktop is a really practical, handy tool that's very simple to use. You just go to desktop.github.com, and the cool thing about it is it works for repositories both on GitHub as well as in GitLab. You can connect to those as well. So you just download that and install that, and I've got that installed. So I'm going to pull that up here, and I'm just going to create a new repository. So I'm just going to create a brand new one. I've got it pointing to the folder or the UAG files that I want. And I'm just going to call this one all this VCS demo students. And so it's going to create that. Don't need any of the other ignore things right now. So I'll just click create repository. It's as simple as that. So that has created a repository locally. Now, if I jump over to to my desktop and take a look at that, I can see that I now have this new folder in here called VCS Demo Students. And I can see it's got a get attributes. I'm going to just go ahead and delete that because I'm going to actually use something to recreate that later. And then I'm going to just drop my students demo right into that folder. Actually, before I do that, let me just jump ahead of myself here. So we created this here. We can see it's got an option to publish the repository. So I've got this repository is, it's there on my computer. It's this folder here, but I want to actually publish that to GitHub. So it's just one click, says, it just confirms the name there. It says you want to keep this code private. So I'm going to say yes, go ahead and do that. Publish the repository. So now what that has done is it has pushed that repository up to GitHub. So if I was to go up to GitHub and then take a look at my repositories, I can see here's my new repository I just created, VCS Demo Students. So there's nothing in there right now other than this, get attributes. So that's all great. Now, so how do we actually get our code into this repository? That's where we're going to come back to our students demo. I'm going to just drop that database into there. And then now I can open this database. This folder, enable the content now. And I can come over to version control, and it's literally one click. Export source files. And then it's also letting me know, hey, by the way, I've added a default get ignore and get attributes to the project. This is super helpful in that it's going to actually create a default get attributes and get ignore file for me. So if I was to just take a look at this, get ignore file, I can see that it's already done several things by default. It's going to ignore the binary files, my ACCDB, MDBs, the lock files, that kind of thing. It's going to ignore the index file, some log files and such. So it's just right out of the box, just works really helpful there. This file here that it created, again, is just doing some helpful things to assign some carriage return line feeds to some of my things, set up some other basic options. Again, that's just right out of the box, just the way that it works for us. And so now you'll see after I've exported, by default with no special options set, it will export everything from my database into this folder that's going to have the same name as my database with .src after it. So if I open this folder, I can see that here's a folder with my forms. I can see my forms. I've got queries in there. Got relationship reports, table definitions. Right there, you can see I've got XML as well as kind of a SQL. It gives a nice way to view that. And then some other types of things like my database properties, VB project settings, all of that, just all taken care of for me. So again, just a single click of a button, export all that. So now that I've done that, I really haven't made any design changes to this database, but I'm going to go ahead and just pop this in here. So I'm looking at, I can see that there's a lot of new files in here, which is obvious because it just created all these source files. So I'm going to just call this initial upload. So that's just my vanilla project right out of the box. And I can just click to commit that to the main. And then now that's pushed it to Git locally on my computer, but I'm going to actually push that back up to the remote origin. It's going to push it up to the github.com site. So for example, if I come back here and I refresh that, now I can see that I've got my source code files in here with all the different parts of my database. Now, I want you to notice something though, is that we don't have our database binary in there. That's intentional, that's by design, because these source files now represent our database. That's everything that we need to be able to actually build this database from source files. So let's jump back into our database. And now if I come here and I click to export source files, you can see less than a half a second. And there were no changes. There's nothing for it to export. If I leave that screen up here, you can see it scan for changes and just super fast, super efficient in checking for any changes, nothing to change there. So that's all good. Okay, now I want to actually build this database from source. So how do we do that? So I want to take the set of source files that I have there for my project right here, and I want to actually have this database built directly from source. So that is as simple as coming over here to this button, build from source, and you just click the button. Would you like to build it from source? Confirm yes. And then it basically grabs all those source files and completely reconstructs my database entirely from those source files. So if I come back to here, I can see that even my navigation pane, custom groups, and all of that is just exactly as it was with the original database. So I can come up to student list and I can see the form and everything looks great. But I notice a problem. Where is that student that I just created? It's missing. Well, that's a really good point that I want to just highlight here, is that when you export your database to version control, you are exporting the definition of your database. That's the design of all your forms and tables and everything. It's not exporting your data from your database. Now, there is, if you go into the options, there is a way that you can export. It can say I want to export my students as XML, and I could do that. I could export that data, and then when I build it, that will come back in as data. But there's actually a better way that we can do that I want to highlight here with this. So we built from source, but realized, oops, we forgot we've got data that was in that database and that's no longer there. The tables are all empty. So I can close that. And the great thing about it is every time you do a build from source, it actually creates a backup of the original database. So here's my original database as a backup. And then as you build it multiple times, you'll see, multiple files that will come in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just delete the one I just created. I'm going to come back to here and I'm going to rename that back to my original file. Double click it and I'm back in. So I just rolled back to my previous one before I built from source. And now I'm thinking, okay, I would like to be able to, save this data so that I'm not having to, re-add that every time I build this. Well, there's a better way to handle this. Is we probably actually want to split the database into a front end and a back end. That way I can have all of my data in the back end and I can make all these changes on the front end on the application side and then have it share the same data on the back end. So I'll click to split the database. So where you want to put that. And so we're going to stick that back end file just right in that same folder. That's how it's split. Okay. And it says I couldn't do that because I had a form open, so the data was not, table was not accessible. So no problem. We'll just rerun that. Back to here. Replace that. Successfully split. So now you're going to notice that now your table here for students, instead of being a local table inside this database, it's now a linked table in a separate database in the backend database. So let's jump over to version control now that we've made that change, and let's just export source files. Okay, and we'll take a look over here and we'll see what has changed. So we can see that there is this file was deleted, and this students. So here's the students table, I guess, to look at that. So here's the original one is the students. That was the XML definition of the internal table itself. And then this is the new file, which is a JSON file that links to that linked table. And so it tells us here's the connect information to get to that file. And you notice that this is in a JSON format. The add-in is designed to store all of its data in JSON when it deals with just text-based data that's not natively exporting in a particular format. And that just gives it an easy way to be able to have a human readable and yet very parsable, editable type of a format to work with. I also want to point out here, you notice how it's got this relative path. That's a really handy thing that it's going to do right out of the box. If those databases are in the same folder, it's going to just plug in a relative path so that you can move that entire folder to a different location, and then that table will still be able to link back together with no issues. So that's just a helpful thing that it also does for us. So we can see those tables again, the same thing that happened over there. And then we also can see there's a relationship that disappeared from there. So it's just helpful to know, okay, there was something else that happened, so we could recreate that relationship as needed. And then we can see a little change that happened in some custom objects. Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and just commit that change. So we've made a change. We split the database. So we split it to the back end. So we'll just commit that, and we'll push that change. That sounds great. Okay, so now go back to our database. We can close it, and we can reopen it. We can see everything is there. Okay, now let's do a build from source, and now we should be able to build this database from source. So I'm going to go back to build from source, and I'm going to confirm yes, I want to do that. Let's do there. Build from source. I can switch back to that student navigation, double click that. Now we just built from source, and now we can see here's a student. Everything is all in there, all of our data. So now we can make changes on the front end of this database without impacting the data on the back end side. Now, after we built from source, we're going to go ahead and just export source files. Now, keep in mind, this is the first time this database has ever been built from source. So yeah, it's normal that you're going to see some changed files in here the first time that you build a database from source, just because it's there's some internal things that just come together a little bit differently the first time it builds it. So that's not a problem. It's normal. So I'll just call this first build from source. Just commit that. Okay. So that's great. So now we built it. Now we've got a version that we've got that's built from source. So I can go to student list. I can see things. I'm going to jump back to that database now, just to demonstrate this again. If I want to build this from source, I'm just going to do a fresh build right from source. Okay, so I've just done a fresh, fresh build from source, and I can verify that everything looks good, everything's there. Now, if I go here and I go to export source files, you'll see that because it's a fresh build from source, it's going to go ahead and export everything again, just to be sure. But let me point out right here, if you jump in here, you can see there are 0 changes in here. That's really important. That's really helpful, because now we've got something that is a repeatable build from source, and you notice there's no noise. There's no extra changes reflected just from a fresh build from source. So from this point going forward, it's going to be a fairly clean, process as we build. And again, the cool thing about version control, we can go back, we can see all of those changes that we made in the past. So let's go ahead and just make a change on our database. I'm going to go ahead and go to my student list. And, this is actually for a high school. So I'm going to just change this and say high school student list. And I'll save that. Okay, so now we've got a change that we've made. Okay, so we're going to export source files on that. Now notice what happened. It found one form that it exported. If I want, I can take a look at the export log. And I could scroll down, I could, see more details about what it found, what it exported, see some performance metrics and the different things that ran. It's kind of a helpful little thing to check out. Okay, so I made that. So let's jump over to GitHub and look at that. You can see the caption changed from student list to high school student list. Right there, we can see exactly what changed on our export. So just fantastic. I'll just note this as now, what the granularity of what you want to commit to version control is totally up to you. You can do every little change that you make. You can do batches of changes. For me, just on a practical standpoint, I find it works well to do batches of changes. Every time when I push changes, I want it to be in the version that I'm working on. I want it to be a compiling, working type of a version. And so I find it's helpful just to, maybe work on a particular thing that I'm doing, and then I'll pop in a little summary of what I did and push that up. So, so very, very helpful. Now I can say that I can build it from source. Let's say that, and the cool thing about this is it opens up so many possibilities from a multi-user development standpoint. I've got this repository, but I've pushed my changes out to GitHub. So the next developer, in the office down the hall from me, he can check out this same project and start doing some development and some work on it. Now, let me just take a moment just to talk a little bit about how to kind of work in a multi-developer. I don't want to get too deep into this right now, just for the sake of what we're looking at today, but I highly recommend that every developer, you check out your own copy, your own version locally on your computer. So the source of truth, the final authority, in a sense, the project itself, that's up here in our Git repository. So anybody can come over here and clone that into GitHub Desktop and then pull it right in there. That's where your official project is, and you're committing changes, you're pushing changes to your source files up into that folder. But let's say George was wanting to work on this project here. Well, the great thing is we could just delete that file, because when George goes and checks out the project, he noticed there's no binary file. Well, how in the world does he actually get his project to how does he get a copy of that compiled file? Well, that's the neat thing about this, is you can go to version control and you can build from source with, if it's got an open file, it'll just by default, it'll pull in that file. But you can also click build from source, and you can come over and you can select the source folder. So this is that source folder, that .src. So I have no binary that's installed for the students on this here. So I'm going to click that source file, and it's going to pull in all of those things. And then now, if I jump back to here, now I've got a binary file. So George just created his own copy, his own version of that, just right on his computer for his local development. Now, from a back-end standpoint, if you've got front-end, back-end, like what we're doing here, maybe this file would be on a network drive, or this would be, in a different location. Maybe this is a SQL server you're connecting to on the back-end. If you were doing a project like this, where you wanted to, have the back-end project where you're also making changes and developing that, it's as simple as, let's just go ahead and open a copy of that. And let's go to version control. And let's just export source files. I'm just going to export the source files for my backend side of it. Okay, so now I've got, you notice I've got a new folder up here for the source files for my backend. And that's got a similar kind of thing with the backend. So now I can open either of those two databases. Those are all, stored in that same folder. Notice now I've got all the backend. So I'm going to just call this so I'm just uploading the backend source files. Okay, great. So now we got the front end and the backend source files for this project, all nicely inside this repository. And I can do the same thing where I could, build the backend from source, and that would, work great for what I needed to do. Now, that might, that might bring up another, another question. Well, how do you handle, changes that might be made on something? How do you know like what the difference is in a change that happens on your backend? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just open this backend file, and I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to just actually go on the one of these tables, and I'm going to make a change. Make a small change there. Okay. All right. So that's done. Okay. Have you ever had the situation where maybe you've got a database you're working on for a client, and the client's like, this thing isn't working. It's, something broke. And the first question is, okay, well, what changed? Have you changed anything? Well, yeah, I think we did a little something, but it wasn't related to that. Well, do you know what changed? I'm not sure. Well, with version control, it makes it super easy to be able to actually see what changed. So just to highlight that, just to illustrate it, I'm going to just make a copy of that source folder. So I just duplicate that source folder just as it was. I'm going to open up that backend file, and I'm going to export source files. So exported as one table. Interesting. Okay, well, I could go to the log file and I can see which table it was, and kind of have an idea of what changed. But there's another option. Come over here, select these two folders, and then if you use something like WinMerge, and you pull that up and say, okay, what's different about these two folders? Well, of course, the log files are going to be different, but what I'm interested in is the actual object definitions. Something is different. So I could open this XML file, and I could see, now it's because that's the first time that we edited that one in design view. So it's changed some internal, structures as far as how it stores that. But let me take a look at the SQL file. And the reason that we added the SQL file, it doesn't actually use the SQL file when it builds it, but for me, it just gives me a very simple, human readable way of just seeing my table definition at a glance. Now, you're not going to see really complex, types of properties in here, but you do get a really good basic idea. So right here, we can see that last name changed from 50 characters to 100 characters. Great. Okay. All right. Now I know what actually happened on that table. So it just, again, just a powerful way to be able to just compare between a couple of versions on something. So I'm going to just delete that copy now that I've seen what the difference is. And this is a great way. Maybe you've got, two copies of a front end. I know there's people out there that probably have, folders of front ends with different dates on them. Well, this is a powerful way to be able to just open that front end, export source, open the other front end, export source, and then diff those two folders. And you can see at a glance what the difference is between those two projects. So this is a very, very powerful, powerful tool there. Now, let's say I come back to my, students database here and say, you know what? I actually want to make a change because it's technically it's our junior high, students list here. So let's save that change. Just kind of export that. Again, we just built it from source, so that's why we're seeing some extra stuff there. Okay, so here's our change that we can see. We change that to junior high students. Now, you can see those changes that happened in the XML. But the cool thing about this is you don't have to commit everything that's out there, and that's what I really love about GitHub Desktop is it makes it real easy to say, okay, I want to go to my student list, and I want to just, the only thing I really want to commit in this particular commit is I just want to update this caption. I'm going to revise the caption of my main form. Okay, we'll just commit that change. Okay, that sounds good. And then now we can see a little difference here because we don't have the same navigation pane looking at all objects. I'm going to switch that over back to navigation. So we can probably see that the next time we open it. There we can see these changes. Okay, so I'm going to just commit those. So you'll notice now it's exporting the the SQL from that table. So it's a linked table, but it's still showing me on the front end because it does impact my front end in my development work. So this is just kind of a for reference that I'm changing that. So I'm going to go ahead and update that to just reference that I've changed those. It's changing the field size for last name. Okay, so we've got some things. Now you notice sometimes queries, you'll see some changes in that. Occasionally you'll see some noise in when you edit query definitions. Some of those change. I won't go into some of the details on that, but sometimes if you see some extra things like that, you can just commit some of those changes along with another commit that you're doing or separately or such. All right, so I've got my project here, and I can go to my student list. I can see it says junior high school students. Okay, well, maybe something happened now, and I just got notified that we just had a major bug that happened in our our students demo, and we need to roll back to another version. Well, I don't have to go back and try to dig through my folder of front ends to try to remember which version it was that I had, and try to find that and see if it had the change that I'm looking for, or something. That the nice thing is now version control is actually going to help us out. I can see here, oh, this is where I changed the field size. Okay, here's where I revised the caption on the main form. So I actually want to go back to the commit before that. And this is actually where I want to go back to, is where just before I made that change in on the caption. So I'm going to come to here, and I can right click on here, and I can say check out commit. So I'll click that, and you sure you want to do that? And I'll say yes, I'm sure. Okay. So now I've checked out that commit, and what that has done is in this folder, it has updated the source files to reflect that particular commit of where things were at that point in time. So I could come back up here. I can go to my students demo database, and then I can go to version control and build from source. Source, and you can see right there now is right back to high school student list. So we're back to a snapshot of a previous development version. And again, you're going to have the full flexibility of, whatever level of granularity that you had in your commits to be able to, to have those things. So now that I've pulled that in, I'm going to say, okay, now I want to actually switch back to my main branch that I've got. So I switch back to the main branch. But remember that the file that I'm dealing with, now has some changes that are a little different than what's on my main branch. But in the access file itself, in the binary, this is still what I built from that previous version there. So I could export source files from here, and then I can go back and take a look at things. I can see, okay, so what's different? Okay, we went from junior high school student list to high school student list. Now, why am I seeing this change? I'm seeing this change because in my source files, when we switch back to the main branch, in my source files, it's showing junior high school student list. But in the binary that I built from that previous commit, it's got this caption of the high school student list. So now I've kind of rolled it back to that previous change right there. So that's great. So now I can continue working on from there. And branches, again, won't go into a lot of detail here, but branches are a powerful thing. You can have branches as you develop, test out different features, and you can switch to that and start building out, testing in parts of your application. But you still have maybe your primary, maybe your release branch that's out there that's kind of like, okay, this is the bug fix only version that's being deployed to our users. But you have the freedom and flexibility to be able to edit and work with some of those changes. So again, it gives some powerful tools to switch back and forth between different commits, to manage things, all from just being able to export your source files and being able to build from source. So I hope that's been helpful to kind of get a picture of kind of how to use that the system on just kind of a basic level there. And just to point you on a few things that may be helpful for you on the if I jump back to the project here, to the msaccess-vcs-addin project, here I can see the details on the main form. If you're wondering just how do I get started, and it is very simple to do. This quick start will just get you up and running in less than 5 minutes. You go to the releases page, you download it, and then extract it out of the zip file. It's important you do that. Extract it out of the zip file and then double click the add-in file. So I'm just going to demonstrate how to do that, just so that you get a picture of how to get started. Come over to releases. I can see here's the last release. So here's under assets. I can see here's the zip file. And then now I've got version control that I've extracted out of my downloads folder. And so I can double click that file and can enable content. Then I can click to install the add-in. Now it says, oh, you can't update it right now. And the reason is because I have access already open. So before you install the add-in, you'll want to make sure that access is closed. So I can see now that all the versions of access are closed. So I'm going to click that. I'll click install the add-in. Success. Now it's installed. It's as simple as that to install the add-in. The next time you open access, you'll have this new ribbon up there to be able to use the add-in. So that's as simple as it is to just get started. And I've demonstrated how to do some of the basics of exporting your files to source control, and then importing or building from source. On the project for the add-in file, you can also see the wiki. It has some different documentation about some of the different options that are there. It has a list of the types of objects that are supported by that. Your macros, class object, hidden object, embedded images, all kinds of stuff, much more than we would get necessarily in just the built-in exports tools that Access has. So that's a little bit of the basics of how that works. The thing that I love about this this particular add-in is that all of the source code for that is actually saved using this add-in on the back end. In fact, if I go into my VBA editor, I can actually see all the modules and everything, all the code, source code, right, for the add-in right in here. So you can see exactly what it's doing. You could even stick, breakpoints in there if you wanted to have your code pause at particular spots if you're trying to troubleshoot something. So it's just a very open and flexible architecture to be able to add and expand for the different types of objects that it's exporting. So I guess as we wrap up from here, just again for me, the power of being able to have that linear development history of what's changed and when it changed, and having all those things, being able to jump back to compare between different versions, it brings a tool like Microsoft Access in the rapid application development just to be faster and more efficient than it's ever been before. It gives me as a developer, it gives me the confidence of being able to jump in and make changes to a database without worrying about, am I breaking the production system that's going to now create problems for end users, and not have an easy way to be able to roll back from that. And once again, it just kind of it's a mentality shift, because you're basically going from, instead of this being my project, the binary file, I'm saying rather, this is my project, this is my source files. That becomes the source of truth for this project. And then the binary file is a place where I do all my development, and it makes it really powerful to do that. But the source files is where everything is stored. That's what's committed to the repository. That's what I'm collaborating and sharing with other developers as we go forward. So I hope that's been helpful, and getting a chance to see how some of that works.
Yes, thank you, Adam. That was great. And like you said, this is for many Access developers who haven't used source control, this is a little bit of a mind shift. But if you've done development in other environments, maybe some WinForms development or ASP.NET development, and you use source control, you're familiar with the benefits here. So I'm going to put a link to the project, to Adam's project, for you to download. I'll put that in the description below the video, as well as a pinned comment, so you'll be able to easily go and read that and download it and play around with it. Adam, thank you so much for your time, all the way from Big Sandy, Texas. And it's great for you to take the time to present today, to join us. We're very grateful for that. This is an exciting thing, and for our people watching this, we hope that you give it a shot, and leave your comments if you're so inclined below this video, and let us know what you think. Adam, thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Very, very great tool, integrating with Git, which is of course the industry standard for source control. So Access, using this, Access is up there with Windows development and web development in terms of being able to have a repository that you can have stored in a central location. As you showed, you can go back and you can view the changes that you've made. You can roll back to a prior version. You can build from source as your source of truth, as you say. You can work in a multi-developer environment where everybody just keeps synchronized with whatever is checked into the repository. So many benefits here. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to share with us today. It was great to have you with the Denver Area Access User Group. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. Pleasure connecting with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time at our next Denver Access User Group presentation. See you soon.
Okay. And then that has downloaded.